Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the November webinar for the SPC contest. This is Rachel Endecott. I also have Jackie Atkins here with me at ASA headquarters.
Hello.
And Chip had a conflict, so we're gonna not have him this evening. He did let me know that all the steers but two are already settled in at the feedlot. We do have a couple of steers still coming. The Virginia steers are on their way, so they're en route. So Chip expects them tomorrow, I think. And so we're pretty excited to have that on board, and your steers are all in line, so this is a good thing. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. We'll just talk a little bit about what's going on, what's going to go on this year, and just a little bit about kind of a 30,000-foot view of the steers that you guys have entered, and we'll talk a little bit about the sampling, the DNA sampling that's going to happen, and how that impacts our genetic evaluation. Maybe. All right, so we'll start out with just a little geography lesson. So you can see here, these green little pins are locations where steers came from. And so you can see we've got a nice kind of a centralized group here in the Midwest near Missouri, which doesn't surprise us, I suppose, but have 3 families in Minnesota, some Colorado folks as well. And then our Texas and our Virginia are our long haul steers. So we're excited to have you all on board. Really look forward to getting to know you guys better and work with you throughout this project. So here's where we are. Got the steers headed to that pink pin there in Columbia. So I did a quick run through today of the steers that have been entered. And so we average there's going to be somewhere in the 51 to 53 head range. Of those 50 steers or so, the whole average steer group wide, they average about 2/3 Simmental blood, with a range of some steers have none to quite a few steers are purebreds. And then the next most common breed type is about 20% Angus, and the range here is 0% to about 62.5% Angus. And so we also have some red Angus, Chianina, and commercial also in the mix. So we've got a good set of steers with, it's going to be a good test. And so the birth date of these steers average March 13th, and they range from the 8th of February to the 15th of April. So Chip indicated that those steers are going to be worked tomorrow, so they'll get initial weights, they'll get their SPC tags, and then they'll also get processed. So some vaccine and some dewormer, some implant based on what the feed yard would like what their protocol is. And so when we meet again in a month, in December, we'll have a little more information about how that's going, get the steers up on feed here over the next week or so, and we'll be able to have some information and look at some data in regard to how those calves went on feed, and we'll be able to see how they're eating and learn more about the diet and so forth. So did a quick scan of EPDs based on the steers that you guys entered, and so for all of these traits that we're going to talk about, we're going to talk about how they're kind of influenced in the feed yard and carcass traits. Everybody, all these steers, the average is breed average or better. So that's pretty awesome. It's a very nice, even set of cattle. I think I'm excited to see how they do. I'm looking forward to seeing what they look like here in the spring. So average daily gain. So that's going to be an EPD that's going to measure how animals gain post-weaning in the feedlot. And then carcass weight, so how many pounds of carcass are we going to have after harvest? Yield grade, so yield grade's a measure of red meat yield. Okay, so we'll talk some more about this later in the year when we start thinking about getting those steers, when they're going to be ready to go to the packing plant, we'll talk some more about what is that carcass data that we're going to get from them that you're going to be able to see. And so yield grade is one of those measurements. And so with a lower number, we have more red meat and less fat. Marb is the EPD for marbling, so that's the amount of fat within the muscle. Okay, so that's what gives our quality grades. Marbling is a big component there, so we're going to check out some marbling when we take that carcass data as well. Back fat is another measure. So back fat's just the fat at the 12th rib, sorry, wrong species, at the between the 12th and 13th rib. And so that external fat plays a role in calculating yield grade as well. Ribeye area is another carcass trait measurement that helps measure muscle. And again, the ribeye area measurement goes into calculating yield grade. And then I also did look at both of our selection indices. I looked at API and at TI. And so remember that for the all-purpose index, we're talking about using, say, a bull on a set of Angus-based cows. We're going to keep replacement heifers from his progeny and send the rest to the feed yard and sell them on the rail. Whereas in the terminal index, we're looking at sending all of the progeny of an animal to the feedlot and then selling them on the rail. So we're looking at two different things here, but certainly feed yard and carcass performance play an important role in both of those indexes. So like I said, all the steers are breed average, or the average of the group of steers were breed average or better in all of these traits that play a role and will influence the ability for those steers to gain and finish. So now we'll just talk a little bit about where those steers are living now. So these are some pictures that Chip took last year. So these are the GrowSafe pens at the University of Missouri. So on the left-hand side here, you can see what those pens look like from the outside. And so for those of you who are less familiar, those GrowSafe pens, those GrowSafe units are these gray and black units you can see here. And so each of those units has a scale or a load cell underneath it. And so it's taking weight measurements very, very rapidly, like several times each second. And so when an animal puts their head in the bunk, they'll have an electronic ID. You can see over here on the lower right-hand corner, we've got an Allflex triple combination set of tags, and these will use all three of these pieces. For each of your steers, we'll get one of these visual tags that are yellow, these white tags that are EIDs. So there's a reader that can read those EIDs in each of those GrowSafe pens or GrowSafe units. So when an animal puts their head in, it knows that animal is eating, and so as the scale continues to take those weights every second or faster, we know exactly how much that animal is eating. And so then when they leave, then the GrowSafe unit reads their EID tag again, and we know that they've left. So we'll take a look in December probably at what that looks like. So we'll be able to look and see what that daily intake pattern looks like over a period of time for a group of steers or for individual steers. So like I said, excuse me, so you can see this black steer here has his head in, he'd been eating, okay, and so he's got that yellow visual tag, and so you can't quite see here in this picture, but he's also got that white EID tag in, and then you've got that little clear tube with some red plastic attached to it, and that's a tissue sampling unit. And we'll come back to that, but when those steers get processed tomorrow, Chip's going to be taking a sample, a little ear notch, and that will end up in that tube, and then we'll send those in to GeneSeq to the laboratory to get those steers genotyped. So here's another picture from last year, taken from the other side, from the inside of the pen looking out. And so again, you can see what the other side of those gray GrowSafe units looks like. And so as the steers are coming in and they're kind of receiving either kind of adjustment diet, probably I'm betting they're going to be fed mostly in those concrete bunks on the right-hand side of this pen here. And then over time, as they get acclimated, then some of those bars that you see that are narrowing the space in that GrowSafe feeder will probably, the staff will probably take those out so the animals can get used to putting their head in and out. And then as they get more acclimated, they'll put more bars in. So the cool thing about GrowSafe is that you can adjust those bars to make sure that only one animal eats at a time. So you really are getting a good measure of individual animal intake. And you can also see in some of these red steers, they have, you can see a little white above the yellow tag in their left ear, and that is the EID tag that we were talking about in the last one. So just a quick reminder of kind of how we'll go about determining the profitability of the steers that you guys have entered. And we'll take an individual valuation, so we'll assign a value to these guys based on their weight. And then the USDA Ag Marketing Service report data will use the weekly Nebraska feeder cattle report. And that will be included as a cost in the SPC. And then we'll continue to accrue those costs that you will pay for and your feed bills and your monthly bills from that delivery. So since the steers have arrived, we're starting to accrue costs already from delivery through harvest. And then our final valuation will be based on total carcass price. So then we're gonna, those steers will go to the packing plant. We'll take that carcass data, and then based on how they perform, yield and quality grade, we'll assign premiums and or discounts and come up with a carcass price, and then we'll multiply that out by carcass weight, and that will be your final valuation. And so, because it's certainly possible that we might have more than one harvest date for these steers, to make it fair for the purposes of the competition, the carcass-based price, premiums, and discounts are going to be averaged over that harvest period, whatever it is. If they go 2 separate weeks, we'll take those 2 weeks and make an average. If it's longer than that, we'll make sure that we average that out over the harvest period to make it fair for each contestant. And so then when we get all done and we have that final valuation and we have those costs that have accumulated since from now until those steers are harvested, we'll take that carcass value, we'll subtract the accrued costs, and then that will give us our SPC profitability measure. So you might be wondering, well, how will we figure out what that initial value is on these steers? And so this is just a quick example of what we'll do. So tomorrow when Chip goes to help the feedlot staff weigh these steers, that will be the weight that we'll use. And so here's just an example from the November 3rd Nebraska Weekly Feeder Cattle Summary. Okay, and so we've got, they break these out into 100-pound brackets. And so we've got from 400 to 499 on up in 100-pound increments to 800 to 899 pounds. Okay, and so if you're not familiar, calf prices are generally given in a dollars per hundredweight format, and that's what CWT stands for, is a hundredweight, and a hundredweight is simply 100 pounds. Okay, and so if we wanted to, so it's often easier when we're just learning about calf prices to think about calf prices in a dollars per pound format. So if we know that the 400 to 499 pound calves, we're bringing $194.41 per hundredweight. If we move that decimal place 2 places to the left, we get $1.94 pound. And so that's those. So we just quickly through here just kind of went through, so you can see that if a steer weighed 725 pounds, for example, we're in the $160.30 a hundredweight, or $1.60 per pound. So here's a quick example. Let's say your steer tomorrow when Chip weighs them, he's going to weigh 575 pounds. So we go back up here to our feeder cattle summary, and we see that the price for this bracket of steer is $174.38 per hundredweight. Okay, so if we take that 1.7438 times 575 pounds, we can say that that steer's initial value is $1,002.69. Okay, and so that's that value that will accrue as a cost. So you might be wondering, well, why is this a cost? Okay, and so this is a way for us to, it's kind of that, when you guys get into college, if you go to college and you learn about economics, they're going to talk about opportunity costs to you. And so this is the opportunity cost. So instead of retaining ownership and feeding this calf, you could have taken the opportunity to sell him at auction for this price. These are the prices we're going to use. So we're going to make this kind of a separate feeder cattle enterprise. So the opportunity, you could have taken the opportunity to take that $1,000, but instead you're keeping that steer and you're going to feed him out and hopefully be able to make that money back later in the year when you sell him on the rail. Okay, so now back to that DNA sample that I was talking about. All right, so here's a more kind of a zoomed in picture of that tag combination pack that we were talking about. And then on the right-hand side, you've got the applicator, and then that little TSU, tissue sampling unit, is loaded in the applicator. So once you get that loaded in the applicator, you actually take the red piece off, and there's a sharp edge, and you're able to it'd be just like putting a tag in an ear. So you're just going to punch that applicator just like you would a tagging tool. And then a piece of the ear will be cut out and it goes down in that tube. There's a little fluid in that tube. These tubes are really cool, and we really are grateful to Allflex for being a partner with us in this project, and they were able to get these donate these to us, and so we're sure tickled to have them on board. And so the sample has a barcode that you can, that has a little barcode that can be scanned, and then that same barcode number is on the side. So we'll be able, so Chip will write down your tag number, and then so with these combo packs, the barcode will match the long number, that 982 number that you see there. So the barcode will be able to reference back to that number, and we'll be able to keep track of that sample as it goes through the lab. And so these TSU units are really neat. We have quite a few coming in through the office now with our cow herd DNA roundup project. And if you follow the instructions and do this right, it's pretty cool. You can have those samples can stay good for up to a year at room temperature, which is really neat. And so biggest thing we've been telling our members is just, make sure you don't leave them on the dashboard of your pickup and those kinds of things, or have them in a place where temperature fluctuates a lot. So we'll be taking these DNA samples on these steers, and then we're going to genotype them. And you might be wondering, well, why would we do that? So we'll talk quickly. We talked a little bit about EPDs already this evening. We'll just do a quick primer here, and hopefully by the end, I'll have you convinced of why these DNA samples are kind of cool and kind of important. Okay, so an EPD is an expected progeny difference. Okay, and so this is an estimate of how a bull or cow's future progeny are going to perform on average for some trait. Okay, and we need to compare that to another animal's future progeny. Okay, so EPDs, if you get nothing else out of this little piece of this webinar, EPDs don't mean anything by themselves. They have to be compared to something. So you have to compare the EPDs of animal A to animal B, for example. You could also compare the EPDs of an animal to the breed average, like we did earlier tonight, where I told you that the EPDs the average EPDs for the steers that you all have entered were breed average or better. So let's divide those three pieces up. So expected, okay? So expected, hopefully when you think expected, you mean, well, we don't know for sure, okay? So it's an educated guess. So it's what we think is going to happen based on the information that we have available. So what kind of information can go into this, can help us figure this out? Okay, so it could be performance records for the individual animal, their sire and dam, other relatives, and progeny. Okay, so if we have a bull, for example, we probably know something about how his sire and dam performed. We know about his individual animal performance, so we know his birth weight, his weaning weight, his yearling weight. We can submit all of that information to ASA, and then when we use that bull and he has calves, we report data on those calves so we know how his calves perform based on that progeny performance, and we use all of that information to calculate EPDs. Okay, now the more information reported for an animal, the more confidence we have that our prediction, our EPD, is accurate. So you might be familiar with the idea that EPDs have some sort of associated accuracy with them. And so we might have heard that a young animal is not very accurate because we don't have a lot of information about them. We know about their sire and their dam, and we know about their individual performance, but we don't know very much. We don't know anything about their progeny yet if they haven't had any. So one thing that this DNA sample is going to do is it's going to provide more information. So it's like adding more performance records to the animal because we have an understanding of what markers are located where on their chromosomes, so we know what their genotype is. Now, when we think about progeny then, so expected, we talked about what we think is going to happen based on our available info. Now, progeny, then we use these EPD values to predict how an animal's calves are going to perform compared to another animal's calves in whatever trait we're considering. So, for example, let's say it's carcass weight. Okay, so let's say we're going to compare, we're thinking about buying some bulls and we're looking through the sale catalog and we see, we're wanting to send the calves from these bulls to the feedlot. We know that our carcass weight could use some improvement in our herd. So we can compare two bulls' carcass traits to one another, and then we'll be able to have some indication of how we think the calves from those bulls would perform. And then difference. Okay, so again, that's underlining the idea that it's really important to compare the differences between animals, or between an animal and the breed average EPD for that trait. So again, EPDs by themselves are not useful to you because you need to know more. You need to know what, if I told you that bull A has a weaning weight EPD of plus 65 and you didn't have any other information, that doesn't really mean very much to you. But if I told you he had a weaning weight of plus 65 and then there was another bull who had a weaning weight of plus 85, you would be able to say something about that now. You would say, well, that second bull should have calves who on average weigh 20 pounds more at weaning than the first bull. So we talked a little bit already about this, but just kind of another piece to underline it. How do EPDs get more accurate? Okay, more information, simply told. The more information you have about a particular animal or their progeny or their relatives, the more accurately we can predict their calves' performance. Okay, and so traditionally, as animal breeding and the use of EPDs has kind of evolved, progeny data from an animal's calves was the major golden nugget of how do we get more accuracy. And it's still really important. And so all of if those of you who are seed stock producers you have an understanding of all of those data points that you're collecting. If you're involved in THE, the commercial side, you're probably collecting all of those pieces of data as well. And so that's what fed into the increased accuracy of our sires and dams. Okay. Well, DNA testing and genomic information, they together increase the accuracy of EPDs as well. And what they do is they actually act like progeny reporting. Okay, so if we have more information about an animal's genotype, we can say more about how their calves would perform even before they've had any. And so the way we talk about that is with a term called progeny equivalents. Okay, and so Jackie actually put this cool slide together with some historical data from 2012 when we first kind of started using genomic information in EPDs at the ASA, compared to the progeny equivalents that we have now in 2018 after we've been doing this for quite a while. Now you can see we have a variety of different traits here, and so we'll start here with calving ease. Okay, so if in 2012, if you had an animal who you'd had DNA information on, that was as valuable as if that animal had had 5 calves and you've got calving ease records from those calves. Because of the increased amount of DNA information that's been flowing into our evaluation, now getting DNA on one animal is equivalent to them having 15 calves for calving ease. So that's an increase in 10 progeny equivalents. Now think about this when you look down these columns and you look at these numbers. Now, a bull over his lifetime, well, it'd be pretty easy for him to have 21 or 22 calves, right? Well, that's really, unless you have a donor cow, that's not going to happen in a cow's lifetime. And so the ability to be able to know before you've even bred her what her EPDs look like with the confidence that the accuracy is like her having 24 calves already is amazing. It's super cool. So you can look at these. We've made great progress in things like calving ease, all the way traits, birth, weaning, and yearling, milk, and stayability. Now you can see these others that are highlighted here in this kind of yellow color is that we haven't made as much progress. In fact, in maternal calving ease, we haven't really made any. And so this kind of plays into that cow herd DNA roundup I was talking about earlier. And so the ASA board we have this project where we are really looking to genotype dams. We want female information. And so we're hoping that as the CHR data is entering the genetic evaluation, so we're hoping to eventually get to 50,000 cows genotyped, that we'll see these maternal traits like maternal calving ease will have an increase. So it's that we have that nice jump in differences where we get, can look back and say, well, in 2017, 2018, when we started adding these, we were able to improve the progeny equivalents for maternal calving ease by 15 head. So now on the bottom here, we've got carcass traits. And you can see that we've made some improvement. It's pretty mild. But this is where actually your SPC data actually plays a role here. So when you guys get your next register, StimTalk. Register. Yes, when you guys get your next register, if you've been in the SPC contest before, you might see your name in print. Because much like the cow herd DNA roundup, we have a carcass expansion project that we're trying to get off the ground, where we're trying to collect carcass data and get some genotypes on those animals. Now you might be wondering, well, why have these other ones done so much, and why haven't this cow data and this carcass data done anything? Well, over time, breeders have found the most value in getting genotypes on bulls. Okay, so they're going to send in their sale bulls, get them genotyped. Haven't had as much incentive maybe to get the cow herd genotyped, and haven't had much incentive either on the carcass side. So especially if we're thinking about improving the accuracy of EPDs and progeny are involved, well, if you're sending animals to the feedlot to end up on the rail, they're not going to have progeny. And so that's part of the reason why that hasn't happened. And so we're trying to influence that with these two DNA kind of projects. So hopefully, so we know that, so if you have had an SPC steer, you are some of the members of the ASA who have had genotyped animals who also have carcass data. All right, so just a few little housekeeping things here as we kind of finish up. Remember that it's important to attend these monthly webinar meetings and complete your feedback assignments. So the webinars are going to continue to be the first Tuesday of each month at 6 p.m. Mountain, okay? And then the recording, so this is being recorded. The recording will be posted the next day for those of you who have other stuff. We know that you're all busy, involved young people, and you might have some conflicts, not a problem. But do go ahead and get that webinar viewed soon if you miss. Your feedback assignment will be due the second Tuesday of each month by 6 p.m. Mountain Time, okay? And this bottom part's really important. Missing more than one monthly feedback assignment will eliminate you from the program. So what does that mean? Well, you're still going to keep your steer in the project. You'll still pay your bills. You'll still get the money from the carcass of that steer, but you won't get any information on him. So all of the feedlot gain data, all of the carcass data, you won't receive any of that in return if you miss more than one monthly feedback assignment. So please do get those in. And so like if some of you were able to watch the informational webinar, one thing that we decided to try to kind of shake up a little bit this year with SPC was the feedback assignment itself. So we're going to have different feedback formats each month. And so I'm still kind of playing with what that'll look like, but here's some ideas. We might have some short essay questions with prompts, an infographic or a social media post creation based on the information in the webinar. We might also have, similar to what's been done in previous years, that half to one-page summary. And I'm also thinking about ways to implement a short online quiz that's tailored to participant age. And so really all of these will be based on participant age. And so we'll, and the way we're going to do those age divisions is the same way the structure of the National Classic age divisions are laid out. So if you're between 8 and 13, you're in the junior division. Between 14 and 17, you're in the intermediate division. Between 18 and 21, you're in the senior division. Now, while this is still, that 8 to 13 is a big spread, and I do understand that, it's a lot smaller spread than 8 to 21. And so we're going to do our dead level best. That's certainly the feedback that we've gotten from previous folks and from parents that, boy, if there was a way to try to tailor this to age groups, well, we're sure going to try this year. So we look forward to that. And look forward to seeing what kind of cool creative things you guys can come up with throughout the next several months. So with that said, this is what November's feedback assignment is. So basically what I would like each participant to do is to make a list of 3 things that you want to learn more about this year as a participant in the SPC. So what are your goals? Is there something about feeding cattle or something about carcass data that you really, really want to learn about? I want to be able to, we have certainly, Jackie, Chip, and I have some ideas and thoughts about what kind of topics we'll have throughout the year, but we want to know how can we best help you guys learn? What do you guys want to know? So if you can think of 3 things that you want to learn more about this year as a participant in SPC, okay, and if you can email those 3 things to me at the spc@simgene.com email by 6 p.m. Mountain, a week from today, the 13th of November, then your feedback assignment will have been met. You can type it, you can handwrite it and have your folks scan it and email it to me. If you do handwrite it, try to make it so I can read it. I was a college professor for a while, so I have some skill at reading bad handwriting, but I'm kind of out of practice. But certainly I want to make this easy for y'all. I don't want to make it a big production, but this is our feedback assignment for November. What are 3 things you want to learn more about this year? And so based on the feedback that we get, we'll sure try to incorporate those things into future webinars throughout the rest of the contest. So with that, that's kind of all we've got here this evening, so short and sweet and quick. So like I said, in December when we meet Again, let's see, that will be on December 4th. We'll go ahead and learn more about how the steers are doing. We'll talk about initial valuation. We'll talk about feed bills. And then you'll also, before next webinar, you'll also be getting your first monthly newsletter. So as always, shoot us an email at the SPC email address here on the screen. You can call the office. Look forward to visiting with you. Love to get questions. And so, Jackie, do we have any questions?
We do have a question. Yep, it's from the Mortensen family. It's Grace and Cohen are watching this together,
Yep.
And they've asked, does a bull have better EPDs if it is younger? Do they get better or worse? How do they change?
Over time.
Yes.
Well, so when we calculate an EPD for a young animal, basically we're using, if we have information from them about that trait, we'll be able to incorporate their information. But a lot of what we do when we have young animals is we just use their pedigree. So based on the performance of the animals in their pedigree, this is what we think will happen. And so better or worse is kind of hard to answer, but certainly a young animal can have favorable or unfavorable EPDs based on pedigree. And so those can change over time. So thinking about how this all works, there's 30 chromosomes, right? And so we have over 1 billion different combinations of what an egg or a sperm could look like. And so just depending on how those different genes from the sire and dam combine in the individual, it's hard to be able to say what's good and what's bad. You could think about a family, for example. So think about a family with several siblings. Do they all look exactly alike? Do they all have the same personality? Well, no, they don't, and it's kind of the same thing here, is that the reasons that those siblings are different from one another is some of it has to do with genes and what genes got combined from their parents. And so over time we can, if we have more information, a bull's EPDs can become more accurate. It could be that he has good EPDs that are favorable to us in our selection decisions and they become more accurate. Or it could be that a bull might have EPDs that aren't favorable for our situation and they still become more accurate. So I think as good or bad, it kind of depends, but certainly we can have more confidence and feel more like our EPDs are more accurate the more information we get on a particular animal.
And I would add just a quick thing there is an animal, the EPDs have an equal chance of either getting better or getting worse.
Right.
And if that's not the case, then we're probably doing something wrong in how we're using the data. But really, it should be a 50-50 shot that the animals that on average, these animals improve over time or get worse over time, but they'll always get more accurate.
Correct.
So we do have another question asking what will the steers be fed on this project?
That is an excellent question. I would imagine Chip will have more information for us about that. Based on last year, we were kind of on our receiving diet. We had some kind of grass hay base. I think there was some corn silage and some grain in there. And so we'll learn more about that. I anticipate in the when Chip and I get together here between now, after he's got that first data collection done, that he and I will kind of work up a bit of an article for the newsletter, and we'll probably have a nice overview of what those feed ingredients kind of look like for your reading pleasure in between now and December.
And then we have another question, and without Chip on, Rachel, I'm not sure if you know the answer to this or not, but we've got a question from Rain.
Yes?
Asking if his steer adjusted well. First, excuse me, I'm sorry, Rain.
I think so. Chip would be the man to ask, but he did say earlier today, we did talk on the phone, and he said everybody who has arrived they've been sorted into their pens. And everybody seems very healthy and in good shape. So I do think, I imagine there's always going to be some adjustment. But it sounds like everybody was sorted where they're going to live for the project, and everybody was rocking and rolling. So sounds like things are going well in Columbia.
Good deal. All right. Well, I think that's the last of the questions. Oh, wait. Oh, 1 second. Do the identification tags, EID tags, and TSU samples all have the same corresponding barcodes from the Hayes family?
I think so, but I'm pretty sure they will.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. Yes, they would. I don't know if on the TSUs, if they'll have like the leading SM on them.
Yeah. Yep.
Like our sim ones do, the other samples do or not.
Yeah, so they are all three of those are tied because they come in these combo packs. And so all three of those IDs are connected.
Right.
Yeah.
And so after, probably in the newsletter when I email that out, or maybe a little before if we get it kind of lined out. So those tags and tissue samples, tags will go in and tissue samples will be taken when those calves get worked tomorrow. And so soon then you guys, I'll get an email out to each family. You'll know what tag numbers are yours. Over time, we're going to go ahead and have the data will be posted on the SPC page by tag number. So each family, you'll get to know your calves' tag numbers, but there won't be any other identifying numbers or names with those steers when they get posted on the SPC page. You'll be able to look at the whole group by number, but only you will know the number of your steers.
That's correct.
Great questions, you guys.
Yeah, I love it.
Already, like, way the coolest group we've ever had in SPC.
You're our favorite.
That's right.
All right. Well, I don't see any other questions, so I think, yeah.
All right. Well, we'll sign off. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and we look forward to visiting with you next month. Have a great night.
Bye, everybody.